Well, thank you, Michiel. Always appreciate this honor and pleasure of potentially failing in concluding such an incredible forum. But I won't try to do it before, first of all, expressing my amazement towards Michiel, Menno, and the whole team on what they succeed in doing in these 2 half days. Because not only do they choose a very powerful red thread, but they succeed in bringing together here, and let me be right with that, so I took it with me, the head of a large research firm, a Finnish researcher, a Silicon Valley friend, a professor from the Sorbonne, lady professor, a UK professor with red socks, a Silicon Valley pretty critical thinker, our friend Andrew, and today, as you do remember, a psychiatry professor, a true-blood futurist, a real COO, an investigative journalist, a designer entrepreneur, an Estonian revolutionary, and an Oxford philosophy professor. I mean, who else could do that? So I'd like to offer my heartfelt congratulations. Now, with so much wealth in our minds, the question is, of course, what to do with it. And I think my only contribution to you as our friends in this room can be to bring you simplification. And actually, I worked from 5 o'clock this morning trying to do that, and I condensed what we heard and what we were going to hear into 5 lessons learned. And to each lesson learned, there is an action which corresponds to it. And then I took these 5 lessons and these 5 actions, and I reduced every one of them to 1 word. So my whole conclusion will be in 10 words. I cannot do better. Please accept my apologies. So, digital happiness, 5 lessons, 5 actions. The first lesson is that all of that thing about digital happiness is real. When I first heard of the theme Michiel and Menno were toying with, I thought this was very clever, you know, this kind of things. It's attractive, it's a good title for a forum like that. It's funny, it's, you know, good stuff, good entertainment value. But I come out of that thing with the conclusion that this is an extremely real, extremely serious topic, and one which we can ignore. If we choose to ignore that topic, it would be at our great risk. Now, when a topic is real, what do you do with it? What's the action? You put it on the agenda. And what does it mean, putting it on the agenda? That means actually discussing it with your colleagues, discussing it with your exec committee, discussing it with your boss, toying with the name, toying with the thoughts behind it, learning about it, put it on the agenda every day. And by the way, if you do that, you know what will happen? You will end up owning this piece of the agenda in your company. And I'm absolutely sure that owning the question, the topic of digital happiness is going to be very, very, very key to your own future. The second lesson is that this whole thing looks like a coin. Why does it look like a coin? Not so much because of the value it represents, but because a coin has two faces. Most coins, I mean, Bitcoins maybe not, but I'm not familiar with them. But the coins I know have two faces. And what are these two faces? One face is happiness. And then we learned a lot in these last hours that there is an equally important phenomenon called unhappiness. And actually the two go together, the two are mixed together, the two are indissolubly linked, and therefore when you work on happiness, you need at the same time to work on unhappiness. And the way to do that, and this is the action, is to promote the notion, promote happiness to the status of an asset of your company. And what do you do with an asset of your company? You eliminate risks to that asset. So you eliminate potential sources of unhappiness. And you promote everything which will contribute, augment your asset. So you look for sources augmenting your happiness asset. The third lesson learned is that this whole thing looks very much contagious. And, you know, one person happy increases the risk of the person besides that person to be happy too. By the way, as we learned about the coin with two faces, if a person is unhappy, the contagion will be that the person beside that person will be quite unhappy too. And the way to treat this is then to create an epidemic of happiness. And that means when you work on customer happiness or client happiness, you cannot forget all of the other constituencies which should be happy in order for happiness to propagate into your whole organization. And we have talked too much about the customer in these 2 days. We have talked too much for the last 5 years about the digital customer experience. We need to talk more because of the contagion of the concept of happiness. We need to talk more about the digital employee experience. We need to talk more about the digital partners experience. How could an automotive company have happy customers if their dealers are resolutely unhappy? I remember discussing with a bank CEO already five years ago, I would say, about digital customer experience already. And he told me we have already forked dozens of millions into digital customer experience, and the results are zero. The needle is not moving on the satisfaction, how do you call this? Scale, not moving. I told him, look, it's very simple, because you have ignored your employees and you haven't forked into their direction 1/10 of what you spent on digital customer experience. You need to balance those because there is no happy customer meeting an unhappy employee and not suffering from it. The fourth lesson learned is that this whole thing is not a sprint. It is a marathon. And I thought that the historical comparisons were particularly interesting. The clock with the 2 last seconds, all of these things. We are just at the beginning of something. We don't understand it, we don't know what to do with it, etc. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Hoping that we won't be dead before the marathon has gone through the first kilometer, as our excellent friend, Mr. Colony, was promising to us. Now, in a marathon, you need some level of speed, but what else do you need? You need stamina. And stamina is the key to winning the marathon. I believe. I've never run one myself, and I don't intend to. Now, as this is a long race, we already know that AI is part of that race, is influencing that race, and if there is any certainty for the whole race about digital happiness, is that AI will play a huge role in it. A constantly, maybe exceedingly dominating role in this whole marathon of digital happiness. And AI has this extraordinary characteristic of generating the greatest hopes and generating the greatest fears. And if you do not master the fears, it will generate massive unhappiness. And if you master the good sides of AI, augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence, then you will be the winner of the marathon. And the fifth lesson is that all of that is now. This is not tomorrow, this is not next week, this is not next year, you know, even if we prepare the budgets. All of that is happening now and is putting pressure on us now, even more pressure than we realize. And when this happens, I propose to you to act on it immediately. Now, some of you might want to start this afternoon after the lunch, you know, the famous lunch promised by Luciano. But most of us will probably act on it only on Monday morning, preparing this weekend and then acting on Monday morning, 8:30. And on Monday morning, I propose to you to introduce a happiness PNL, not just on the foam boards we filled before, but applying the PNL of happiness to your application landscape. So on Monday morning, you take your application landscape and you do the following. You choose the 5 key applications as experienced by your customers, your 5 key applications as experienced by your employees, your colleagues, and the 5 applications, most key applications experienced by your partners. And you look at them and you weigh these applications in terms of, are they generating any unhappiness? Because the defensive strategy there is absolutely key. And how are they contributing to the happiness of respectively my employees, my customers, my employees, and my partners? And with that, you will achieve 2 things. First of all, you will get a first view of how your application landscape actually works in terms of happiness today. And second, you will give, by doing this concretely, you will actually enrich the concept of happiness, which we have discussed so much in these last few days. And that will enable you then to make out of the happiness criterion a design principle for your new applications. Therefore, the next step on Tuesday morning, 8:30, is to take the applications in development and verify that they do respect the principle that your applications have to contribute to the happiness PNL of your company. And if you do that systematically, after a while, guess what? You will have won the happiness marathon. So, these are my 10 words. I hope you find them modestly useful. And would like to thank you for being our client, something we appreciate constantly. and for being with us. And I will give the floor back to Michael. Thank you.
Thank you.